It's tough. It's tough. These 30 years have been tough. Like being sent to a men's penitentiary when I was 19.
The review of Nerissa and Odelia Quewezance's 1994 murder conviction is delayed by arguments over a publication ban.
Whatever we learn from here is what we bring back to our school and teach the junior high students.
These young people are restoring faith in the Alberta justice system.
So the raindrops turning into hearts are from something Anna Mae used to say that to people she cared about.
Mi'kmaq artists care about one of their own, Anna Mae Aquash. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Savannah Kelly. We begin in Saskatchewan, where the publication ban hearing in the case of two sisters who say they were wrongfully convicted of murder wrapped up a day early with no decision. Brent McGilvery has this from Yorkton.
Lawyers for the Quewezance sisters, APTN News, and CBC strenuously opposed the ban on an upcoming bail hearing for the pair whose case is under investigation for a wrongful conviction. Lawyers questioned why the Saskatchewan Crown were seeking the ban in the first place, calling it confusing and unusual, as all of the information about the Joseph Dolph murder trial had been on the public record for 3 decades. Tense exchanges accused the Crown of disliking the slant of media coverage, something the Crown insisted they were concerned about a fair trial for the sisters should Justice Minister David Lametti overturn their convictions. APTN News contacted the Saskatchewan Justice Department. Their statement said, in part, "The Ministry of Justice and Attorney General is aware of the federal review currently underway in this case. We must let that take its course." Nerissa Quewezance, who spoke to the media for the first time, said she just wants media to report on the case.
I think to get awareness out there that women in prison, we need help. Like, there's a lot of injustices still. So I'm glad that people are finally reaching out to us and opening their eyes. It's tough. It's tough. These 30 years have been tough. Like being sent to a men's penitentiary when I was 19. There's a lot of stuff that I've been through with my sister.
She says that seeing her sister Odelia for the first time in 18 years was overwhelming.
It was surreal. It was emotional when I was sitting there with her in the courtroom. Now we're much older. Like, I was 18, now I'm 48. My sister is 20 now, she's going to be 51, so it's, we're getting older, but we're still being strong despite being apart from each other.
Court of King's Bench Justice Donald Lay reserved his decision on the ban until next week, but placed an interim ban on all written submissions in the case. Brent McGillivery, APTN National News, Yorkton.
And now we head to Iqaluit, Nunavut, where our Kent Driscoll is based. Kent, I understand you did an access of information request and found out some new information about the protest that blocked the Mary River iron ore mine near Pond Inlet back in February 2021. How many pages did you get from the RCMP?
Thanks. And yes, I received over 300 pages of RCMP documents detailing how they handled that protest. What's striking from those documents? Just how concerned the division were that things could get out of hand at the protest site. Most of that concern was not focused on the protesters, however, but on the Baffinland employees who were trapped at the mine. First, a little history. On February 4th, 2021, a small group of protesters blocked the Mary River Mine's airstrip. They were against a proposed expansion of the mine that would double output. And at the very same time, a public hearing about that proposed expansion was taking place in nearby Pond Inlet. Baffinland said in court documents that the protest, which lasted a little over a week, cost them $14 million in profit from the mine. Now, RCMP were holding daily meetings to track the protest. On February 7th, Staff Sergeant Dennis Lamb of Nunavut's RCMP is quoted as saying in the meeting, quote, "With over 100 employees set to leave on Tuesday, February 9th, hostilities may be inevitable." He made the point again about worrying about Baffinland on February 10th in a meeting, saying, quote, "Baffinland needs to know not to try and sneak a jet in when and if we can get them off the runway while talks are still happening." Well, it turns out that hostilities were not inevitable. RCMP had a two-phase plan. First part, meet with the protesters and talk with them. The second would have been bringing in officers to go to the site and arrest people if ordered to do so by an injunction. The plan worked in phase one. The end result, the protesters left peacefully. But one thing Nunavut RCMP was not doing, taking questions from reporters. Time and time again throughout these documents, it's mentioned that they either need a media strategy or just shouldn't talk with reporters. And I'll tell you, they didn't. Now, there's over 300 pages to that ATIP, so I don't have the time to get into it all here, but you can find the whole thing online at aptnnews.ca. Back to you in Winnipeg.
It's going to cost a Child and Family Service Agency $150,000. That's because a British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal fined the agency for discriminating against an Indigenous mother. Lee Wilson has the story.
She's an Indigenous mother who lives in Vancouver, who can only be identified as RR. Her 4 children were in the care of Vancouver Aboriginal Child and Family Services Society between 2016 and 2019. In 2017, she filed a BC human rights complaint against the society. It stated that the society's decision to remove and restrict her access to her children was based on stereotypes and prejudice. This week, the BC Human Rights Tribunal agreed, awarding her $150,000 in damages. West Coast Leaf is a nonprofit organization that provided assistance in the case. Its executive director calls it a historic decision.
This is a very important and a historic decision, not only because of the amount of damages that were awarded to the complainant, an Afro-Indigenous woman living in the Lower Mainland, but also because the tribunal member does a really phenomenal and very thorough job of really walking through all of the different dimensions of this system.
The tribunal's 151-page decision states the complaint exposes systemic discrimination and its impact on RR. Tribunal member Devin Cosno wrote, "I find that VAC-FSS discriminated against RR. VAC-FSS's decision to retain custody and restrict RR's access to her children were informed by stereotypes about her as an Indigenous mother with mental health issues, including trauma and her conflict with the child welfare system. Because of RR's indigeneity and trauma, she had a heightened need to be empowered and included in the decision respecting her children, to have complete, ongoing, and accurate information about their well-being. Instead, VAC-FSS responded to her with escalating assertions of power and control, reducing and suspending her access to the children, limiting her communication with the caregivers, and ultimately prolonging their time in care." Vancouver Aboriginal Child and Family Services Society responded with a public statement. VAC-FSS regrets that solutions could not be found outside the tribunal process and recognizes the pain that the complainant went through and the challenges her children faced due to their circumstances and history, leading to VAC-FSS's involvement. West Coast Leaf says the case highlights the need for systemic change in the child welfare system and points out the disproportionate amount of Indigenous kids in care in British Columbia.
I think it's really important to understand these systemic dimensions because this is not just the experience of one woman navigating the system. This is why we have in BC, I think almost 67% of the children in government care are Indigenous, despite Indigenous kids only being 10% of BC's child population.
On Friday, the province passed childcare legislation that will uphold the rights of Indigenous communities to provide their own child and family services. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
We need to take a short break. When we come back, an official ribbon skirt day is one step closer to becoming reality. Welcome back. The impacts of climate change across the globe have been an ongoing topic of discussion in Parliament. And that continued Friday morning in Ottawa during question period as NDP MP Nikki Ashton questioned government support for Indigenous and Northern communities affected by climate change. Here's that exchange.
Mr. Speaker, communities need to be ready before a crisis hits, not after. It took years for the Liberals to finally announce a climate adaptation strategy, a strategy that even they deem insufficient. It is underfunded and fails to deliver the urgent help communities need to face the catastrophic impacts of the climate crisis. We need to use every tool at our disposal, including changing the way Canada's infrastructure bank does its work. Indigenous and northern communities are already bearing the brunt of climate change. Why are the Liberals shortchanging regions like ours?
The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the question. I appreciated a discussion she and I had in terms of making the infrastructure bank more responsive to Indigenous communities and to the fight against climate change. That's exactly what our government's doing. And Mr. Speaker, our adaptation strategy is designed specifically to support communities like hers that are very vulnerable from these extreme weather events. My colleagues made an important announcement this week, Mr. Speaker. This is a continuation of the work that our government has already been doing. And the good news for my colleague, Mr. Speaker, is we intend to continue doing more and more in the coming months.
A bill to mark every January 4th as Ribbon Skirt Day came closer to becoming law. Last night, the House of Commons debated Bill S-219. It passed second reading and was referred to the House's Indigenous Peoples Committee for study. Isabella Kulak is the inspiration for the bill, seen here during a demonstration that happened nearly 2 years ago when she was 10. People were protesting back then because Kulak wore a ribbon skirt to a formal event at school where an educational assistant told her it was not considered formal attire. There was some emotional testimony from a Conservative member of Parliament in last night's debate in the House.
Madam Speaker, and it's truly... And what is so powerful and why I perhaps am brought to tears a little bit in this story is because this young girl demonstrated courage. And supported by her parents, she was able to draw attention to something that is so important in our country right now. And that is the disadvantage that Indigenous folks find themselves in and the fact that there are still these persisting inequalities within Canadian society. And so as much as it is a ribbon skirt, it is so much more that we would be commemorating through this bill.
Workers with the Alberta Restorative Justice Association allow victims of crimes to have constructive and safe conversations with the offender in hopes of understanding each other and preventing future crime. APTN's Chris Stewart has more on how the workers view their program.
These are some of the frontline workers with the Alberta Restorative Justice Association. They arrange meetings between victims and offenders. Victims get a better understanding of the offender, and offenders get a better understanding of how their actions affect their victims. Jan Moran is chair of the association. She says the program does work.
We can say, yes, the person did not commit a crime after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years. It's a very complicated, but the information we do have up to this point is that, yes, it does lower the recidivism rate. Not a huge amount, but by a few percentages.
Joey Daniels is the restorative program manager at the Elizabeth Métis Settlement in Northeast Alberta. He says the association has been welcoming to him and their program.
From my perspective, ARJA, so the Alberta Restorative Justice Association, and the Solicitor General's office have been very supportive of my program. This is my third time presenting at this conference in the past 6 years. So I think there is always that opportunity for Indigenous voices to be heard here.
Work as a group. The junior chief and council from the Ochees First Nation were enthusiastic about what they learned about restorative justice.
We are here today so we can come get some information for our school. We're coming here to learn, and whatever we learn from here is what we bring back to our school and teach the junior high students.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We need to step aside for one more quick break. Still ahead, looking into the root causes of gang violence on the streets of Winnipeg. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Our very own Bill Scott took this photo recently while riding the gondola up Sulphur Mountain near Banff, Alberta. That is most certainly quite the view, and thanks, Bill, for this great shot. We want to see your great photos, and you can send them to us by email to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, we've got 8 degrees in Halifax with some rain. Charlottetown rain as well at 4 degrees. Kuujjuaq, we've got -5 degrees and snow. Nain, snow as well, -4. In Chibougamau, we've got a mix of rain and snow, 1 degree. Val-d'Or, mostly cloudy, a little bit of sunshine there and 6 degrees. Toronto, sunny and 9 degrees. North Bay, mostly sunny, 7 degrees there. Kapuskasing, we've got 6 degrees. Partially cloudy, a little bit of sunshine. Wawa, same thing, 6 degrees there as well. Churchill, we've got snow and -2 degrees. Thompson, same thing, snow, -2. Winnipeg, we've got partially cloudy, 4 degrees. Dauphin, mostly sunny, 1 degree there. Yorkton, sunshine and -2. Swift Current, rain there, 3 degrees. Stony Rapids, snow and -6. Uranium City, snow as well there, -10. Fort McMurray, we've got -1 degree and snow there. Peace River, some rain, 4 degrees. Calgary, mostly sunny, 3 degrees there. Medicine Hat, you're going to see some snow, but 4 degrees. Kamloops, some snow there, 3 degrees. Campbell River, you're going to see some rain, 9 degrees. Fort Nelson, looks like you're going to get some snow there, -8 degrees. Smithers, cloudy, little bit of rain, 4 degrees. Mayo, snowy and -15. Old Crow, -15 as well. You're going to see some heavy snow there. Yellowknife, snowy and -10 degrees. Fort Simpson, you're going to get some snow there as well, -12 degrees. Sax Harbor, sunshine, but -28 degrees there. Inuvik, -23 and snow. Chesterfield, snowy and -23 degrees. Whale Cove, mostly cloudy, -5. Clyde River, sunshine, -22. Arctic Bay, you're going to get some snow, -26. Two Mi'kmaq artists say the city of Halifax needs more Mi'kmaq public monuments, so they're painting a mural to honor Anna Mae Aquash to ensure Mi'kmaq stories and culture are not forgotten. Angel Moore reports.
Artist Taylor Fern Paul is painting a legacy mural of Anna Mae Aquash. Paul from the Pictou Landing First Nation explains.
So the raindrops turning into hearts are from something Anna Mae used to say that to people she cared about. She would tell them that she would be there when it rained. And this is something that's resonated with a lot of people who cared deeply for her. So in the mural, we have raindrops that are kind of turning into little hearts.
Aquash was murdered in South Dakota in December 1975 because some members of the American Indian movement believed she was an FBI informant, something that was not true. She was an activist, but also a mother and an educator. Rebecca Moore got permission from Aquash's family to develop the project.
There's not many women depicted in public art or monuments here in the city, so I also thought it was really important to, just have a mural of an Indigenous woman and telling her story and everything here.
The mural is currently in 6 pieces at the nonprofit studio Wonderneath Art Society, with each section roughly 1 meter by just under 3 meters tall. When complete, the mural will be about 3 meters wide and 5 meters tall.
It's going to be very vibrant, very beautiful, and it's honoring the legacy of Annie Mae in a very good way. And we're talking and we're showing a little bit about who she was as a person, as an individual, and what she was all about. So yeah, we're really bringing the spirit of Annie Mae to the forefront for this project.
Paul hopes the mural will lead to more art and monuments commemorating Mi'kmaq legacies.
Things like this that are so important to our culture, people who are so important to our culture here, it feels so good to be able to have their presence known on our own territory finally, and to share that through public art with the coming generations.
The Anna Mae Aquash Legacy mural will be unveiled when complete, but a permanent location still has to be determined. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabruktuk, known as Halifax.
Winnipeg has approximately 40 street gangs, and they're largely Indigenous-led. They're the source of some of the random attacks and murders in the city this year. APTN Investigates has taken a look at these gangs, and joining us now is reporter Kenneth Jackson to speak about his latest story, Root Causes. Hi, Kenneth. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. So, what made you look into the violence happening in Winnipeg?
Well, I first came to Winnipeg for the first time in 2015, and I did some stories on the streets there. And I walked about a kilometer west of the, APTN's headquarters near Ellis and Furby, and life was pretty tough, but it wasn't that bad. And then I came back a couple months ago. I went for a walk in the same area at around 11 at night, and I realized things have changed so much. There was the violence on the streets, the stories I've heard, but just seeing it for myself, I realized for the first time ever walking those streets that I was a bit fearful. I was like, things have changed, they've escalated. So I wanted to come back and take a deeper look into what was going on.
And how are street gangs involved?
Well, so, what you see on the streets, you see poverty, you see homelessness, you're on the unsheltered, you see the violence. That's trauma-based, right? That's trauma, that's addiction. So gangs are involved in the sense that they control the drug trade. They control that aspect of that life, and they are involved in some of that violence, some of the murders. Some of the young kids that were randomly attacking people were believed to be involved in gangs and that. So that's how gangs are involved, and that's why we kind of started to look at. So our story looks at kind of the life of gangs through 3 former gang members.
And your story is called Root Causes. Why is that?
I was sitting down with the 3 former gang members one evening in Winnipeg just in September, and started talking about their life and growing up in extreme poverty as a result of generational violence from the government through policies like residential schools, 60 scoops, things that still play out today. But they said something to me that really struck with me, is that each one of them grew up wanting to go to jail, wanting to go to prison, and maximum security was the big leagues. Like, they didn't dream of becoming a doctor or going to NHL. Their big leagues, their dream was gangs and prison. And that kind of blew me away. Maybe other people have heard that before, but I never had. And I twigged to that, and I realized this story is not, I didn't come there to find violence and see it and whatnot. I came there to show why it's happening. And through those 3 men, I hope I achieved that with Josh Grummett. And that's why it's called Root Causes. I look at the childhood trauma. I look at the reason why kids today, First Nations children, Métis children, are being lured into gangs because of the generational impact of Canadian policies.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us, Kenneth, about your story today, and look forward to what you do next.
Awesome. Take care.
You can catch APTN Investigates Root Causes a few minutes from now following the news. That's all we have for you on this Friday edition of APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories and want to catch up, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly. Thank you for joining us. Take care and have a great night.